Hmm? Ah! And I know it seems weird. I'll occasionally have people say, dude, I looked at your photos. Can you, we've got some engagement pictures. Can you take our engagement pictures? And I'm like, yeah, I do better with, dead people or, people that don't move. Like maybe we could try your shoot at the cemetery, maybe we could start there.
Podcast Junkies, episode 72. This week we speak to a super fan of the show, Patrick Keller of the Big Séance Podcast. Patrick is someone who discovered the show a couple months ago, maybe longer now. And I guess it's his nature when he finds something that he's passionate about, he dives in head first. And what he did was actually go listen to the whole back catalog, which is amazing, which is awesome. And very quickly, I would see that he was the first one to respond and make use of the retention hashtags. So I'm eternally grateful for all my fans, and the super fans just tend to stand out a bit more because they're just really the lifeblood of this podcast, and they're the reason why I do this show. So I've been following what he's been doing, and I thought it made sense at some point to get him on. So I'm happy we were able to make the time work and talk about his fascination with the paranormal and his upbringing and the Big Séance Podcast. If you're new to the show, then what we do here is, without using magic, there's nothing spooky about the fact that we just look for, we put it together as in the team that I have, but I think I make it a point to try to have one-on-one relationships with people that come on the show because I want the conversation to sound natural. I want the conversation to sound real, and I want you to feel like you're just pulling up a chair next to us and virtually joining us as we're having our heart-to-heart conversation. So that's what happens on this show, and I'm glad you're along for the ride. So stay tuned for the retention hashtag, and it should be funny to see if Patrick uses the hashtag first for his own episode. So we'll see what it is at the end of the episode after the interview. So enjoy my conversation with Patrick Keller of the Big Séance Podcast. Oh, and very quickly before I forget, last week, in case you missed it, we spoke to Morgan Dix, a good friend of mine, on the About Meditation website, and his podcast is amazing. And if you don't have a podcast related to meditation, you should definitely check out his. But more importantly, go listen to that episode 71. It's a bit different than most, a bit more calm, a bit more relaxed, a bit more zen, if you will. And we had a lot of fun. So check it out. So, Mr. Patrick Keller, it's about time, long overdue, that you become part of the Podcast Junkies family.
Yay! I'm so excited to be here. I'm pumped.
When did you first hear about Podcast Junkies? I'm just curious.
I think it may have been actually Dave Jackson, maybe. Okay. I'm trying to think. I think it was about a year ago. I wasn't in from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But like most podcasts that I become addicted to, I cram through, from the beginning. So I caught up fairly quickly, but I think it's been about a year that I've been listening, I think.
Yeah, I remember one of your Twitter, your tweets was like, you found the podcast, and then it was pretty clear to me at that point that you were starting to go through the whole catalog.
As your stats went up like that week, because
I'm like, what happened? This is someone's like going through the whole list.
I'm fairly OCD, and I'm a late night person. So,
okay.
And I think it was also kind of over the summer, I was preparing for school and getting ready. And so, I crank them up and start working and wait for the hashtag. And I'm waiting. And then I think you've made some comments about how late I tweet them because I tend to be up late when I'm listening to it.
Well, it's interesting because it's one of those things where sometimes you don't know who's listening, and as our shows grow, and you can tell me if you've experienced this as well. Like we start to have regular people that we literally like have in our minds as, sometimes now that I'm talking to the episode, I've got folks like you and, there's a handful of hardcore I call them podcast junkies. And, I kind of have them in my mind as I'm going through the show. And I feel like it's good because it gives me the avatar that I can talk to as I'm doing the interview. And then as I'm promoting it as well, like I'm always thinking about those things.
Yeah, in my podcast, I call those my paranerds.
Your paranerds, okay.
Yeah, and I stole your hashtag idea. We call it the paranerd hashtag.
Yeah, please
on my podcast. It was a genius idea. That's awesome.
Well, I sort of borrowed it from my friend. Shout out to Jesse Lawler of the Smart Drug Smarts podcast, episode 6 or 7, I think. He called it the ruthless retention gimmick. Here's the other thing that I just realized. I just have to write this stuff down, because if I don't write this stuff down, I'll forget. I'm going to start referencing the hashtag at the top of the show.
Oh my gosh.
Because that's the whole point, right? Say, hey guys, and don't forget to stick around for
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And then that'll just incent them to say, okay, I want to hear what this is, or unless they want to literally forward to the end and just hear that.
I always wondered if people do that. Or I after I tweet, I'm like, I wonder if he thinks I just did that. I wonder if he thinks I just, jumped to the end and listened.
So do you think it's an aspect of your personality that you are... I had a conversation early on with John Lee Dumas, and he said a lot of people who listen to podcasts are... I forgot what the phrase was that he used, but it was something like a completist or something like that. Like... And you alluded to it, maybe just being OCD, but is there something in your nature where you feel like once you've found something, if it's something that you like, that you really have to get like the whole story behind it, and that's what drives you listening to the other episodes?
Yeah, and I very it kind of like a book, even if it's a book that I'm totally not resonating with, like I have this thing where if I started the book, I have to read physical books, by the way, because I have to have the shelving ceremony where you're like, oh, and place it on the shelf. So even if, I have to finish those things. And if I find a podcast that I'm listening to, and I have a zillion, like a lot of us podcasters, we probably, you do have to weed some out every now and then. But I do, even if I am not really digging it at the moment, I feel like I have to give it a good 5-6 episodes, before I kind of make that clean cut. But it is kind of a obsessive thing too, a trait, I guess.
It's an interesting point that you made, because it seems like my filter for podcasts is getting more and more refined, because there's so much great content coming on board that I feel like I can almost, maybe it comes from my DJ experience as well, because I used to play music and buy music, and vinyl was pretty expensive back in the days. So I would literally have this just really good skill at just dropping the needle on like 3 points in the vinyl and just really quickly saying no, and just go through it like that. Because, I don't have all day to spend in the store, and I don't have the money to buy these like, these are like $7-8 vinyls, and I'd be buying like 20 or 30 at a pop. So, occasionally I'd get a lemon, but as long as the record, the turntable was in the store, I'd be queuing it up. And now I find I have that discerning ear with podcasts as well. Like, you can tell right away if someone's taking it seriously or not.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if that's what you do when you're trying to figure out which ones stay and which ones go.
Yeah, I definitely have. I don't know how many, if too many podcasts about podcasting is unhealthy, because I listen to a lot of them. Yeah. And after a while, you're like, oh my God, do I really why? But I am just get addicted to them, and I love it. And then just listening to what's hot at the moment and what people are doing. And so I have like my different categories. And then I think most people have, they have some that are kind of, they're there for like background, or they're there for relaxing, or, on the car ride. And so it kind of just depends on, I guess, what I'm doing. And what mood I'm in, but definitely I don't know what the podcasts about podcasting always shoot to the top of my list. Even before the like really super produced, like awesome ones. I'm like, no.
Yeah, and I use Overcast, so I've got a podcasting section, and they all go in there as well. And so, yeah, I hear what you're saying, because a lot of times they overlap on the topic, but it's the combination of the personality and the topic together that makes them so engaging. Like I listen to, She Podcasts with Elsie and Jessica, hilarious, right? And Dave Jackson, he's funny as well. And then, and then I listen to Daniel's occasionally, and Daniel J. Lewis from Audacity to Podcast, for those who don't know. And, his delivery is a little drier, but he's got a lot of like tips and tricks. And then
thorough.
Yeah, very thorough. Then the showrunner, and just there's the Eric K. Johnson's podcast Town Coach. Like there's so many that I listen to. Sometimes, and quite honestly, I blaze through them at 2x because I have to. But yeah, and then sometimes they bring on different guests, and so it's just interesting. And in a way for me, it's like I'm part of that community, and so it's a way for me to support them. And every once in a while, I get surprised with a name drop as well. Like I was listening to Podcast Junkies. I'm like, I'm tweeting that. I'm telling them I want to let them. I want to let them know that I heard that. So
we should like get them together and we should like do some like trivia podcasts about podcasting trivia and see who wins, how many points we'd get.
Are you going to try to make it to Podcast Movement?
You know what? I've never been to one of these, any kind of podcast convention, and it's Chicago. I'm in St. Louis area, and I mean, it's still a trip, but if I ever got to one, I think that would be probably my best bet. So I'm considering it. I would love to. I
think you gotta. And the thing is, like, once you do it, like once you attend the first one, you very quickly realize that like those are your peeps, man. That's your tribe. And the 3 days go by so fast because everyone's like, pumped. And just in the mood to like chat, and it's the only place you can go to like have discussions about your downloads one day, your microphone the next day, like your Google, your Twitter strategy like the other day, and
calls to action,
PDFs and like and hashtags and all this stuff that only we think about and drives the people in our house crazy. Yeah, we geek out, man. That's our tribe, and they're speaking our language. So it's cool. Yeah, if you can make it, by all means.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've been to a lot of music teacher conventions, and so I tried to imagine a really hopped up music teacher convention. Even though I think probably the music teacher conventions are a little different kind of nerd, but I think it sounds really fun. I would love to go.
So how long have you been a music teacher?
This is my 14th year I sometimes call myself a 14-year survivor of being a middle school.
So are you like Jack Black, School of Rock?
Oh, I'm probably not that cool. And I'm even subdivide that nerdiness even more because I'm a choir teacher. That's kind of where I started out. I've also taught piano. And then I was kind of telling you earlier, I am so pumped, and my life, it sounds totally cheesy. My life has totally been changed this year because, for 13 years, I taught the same 2 classes, exactly the same 13 years. All of a sudden this year, we have a new, what we call music production and technology class. We call it MPT. And I was very involved. There's 3 of us for 2 years kind of developing this curriculum, which doesn't really exist anywhere, So kind of going from the ground up, but using GarageBand and kind of some, I'll use Audacity in my class a little, and just audio editing techniques. Of course, I had to throw a podcasting unit in there. Love it. Doing some like digital storytelling, kind of Reading Rainbow type things, and like some speech remixing stuff. And it's really been a big hit. And oh my gosh, it has like changed my work life. Like it's kind of gotten me excited again. And it's my podcasting world, I feel like, can kind of, virgin with my, daily work world. And I've never felt so techie in my entire life. And you know why? Because my kids, I assumed, would be teaching me about a lot of the stuff in this cool new lab with like iMacs and stuff.
Yeah.
And I had no clue I would be teaching them how to use a straight up like chunky computer because they're so used to like iPads and touch screens. And they get in there the first day, I'm all pumped. I've been preparing for this for 2 years. And they're like, oh, a mouse. Okay, what? Or like, I'm like, okay, guys, you put the file in the folder and you go to save as, and they're like, okay, what? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys really don't know this, do you? So of course, now I've learned that every quarter we have to have, computer 101 before we even get to the cool stuff. So they're like, Mr. Keller, you know a lot of stuff.
You're cool.
And I'm like, well, no, not really. But to you, I'm pretty techie when it comes to these old school computers. So
your other hobby / passion is photographing cemeteries.
Oh, I haven't been in a while, but yes, I am I guess it was about 2 years ago. I got a new camera. I mean, I have no training for sure. And totally another thing, once again, got obsessed with it. And I can spend easy 2 hours probably just walking around a cemetery. And it's just kind of a very, I know you would get this. It's kind of like a meditation, to me. And you just get in your place and your mode. And you just lose track of time. It could be in the dead of winter. It could be, 20 degrees out. I just love it. And it's hard now to find the time to do it. And I know it seems weird. I'll occasionally have people say, dude, I looked at your photos. Can you we've got some engagement pictures. Can you, take our engagement pictures? And I'm like, yeah, I do better with, dead people or, people that don't move. Like maybe we could try your shoot at the cemetery, maybe we could start there. Yeah. Because that's it's a lot of trial and error. I don't know what I'm doing. I just, I do the best I can, but I love it.
Well, I saw those pictures and I mean, I'll point folks to the site in the show notes, but they're amazing. And I could tell, and you could tell like you took a lot of time to take them. And I totally understand like the contemplative, I knew I was going to screw that word up, contemplative nature of just you and the camera. And, if there's not a lot of people around, it's just, relaxing for you to be doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I've had people say, oh, take me with you, or, the next time you go, give me a call. And, in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, I kind of don't want to. It's kind of my thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to have my focus.
So in terms of tying that in, because obviously the Big Séance, the website started first and then you started podcasting after. But did the interest, I imagine there's some correlation between the Big Séance website and your interest and your fascination with cemeteries. So has this overall interest in I guess you'd call it the occult? I don't know how to the broad category.
I usually use the word paranormal rather than the occult. Kind of scares people.
Yeah.
And sometimes people have a misunderstanding of it, like we're all devil worshippers or something. Yeah. But
so where did the where do you remember the moment in time where the interest in the paranormal started?
It's actually like most people that are in such a giant paranormal nerd would have this story that goes back to their childhood or this paranormal experience. And I don't have that experience. And mine is even nerdier because a lot of people wouldn't admit this or won't admit it. But, 2008 is really kind of when it all, maybe even a little earlier than that. But Ghost Hunters, the paranormal TV show.
Yeah.
It was a combination of that show coming out which is a little, that's a little shame-based right there. That's a little embarrassing. But the Ghost Hunters coming out. And then there was a book that I found, I think at Borders or Barnes & Noble by James Van Prague. And it was Ghosts Among Us. And I think it was just in some bargain bin or something. And, I read it and it's really dorky. But oh my gosh, it's so just changed things. And so then from there, I was also in a time period where I was just getting into reading. I never, ever, ever read growing up. And so I remember about that time, I had just had a year where I read like a book a week for a year. And it was all fiction stuff. And after that Ghosts Among Us book, that like fiction's out the window. Now all of a sudden I am reading books by psychics and mediums, constantly paranormal investigation topics. There for a while, I kind of went into kind of a more spiritual kind of meditation, channeling kind of. Every couple of books, I just changed to this new, paranormal area where I was wanting to learn more about. And that's what started the fascination. People will ask me if I had experiences when I was little, and I don't think I ever did. I mean, I never lived in a haunted house or anything like that. But it just started, and then I started a paranormal team, in 2010. And so we had some experiences there, but it just very intense for a couple of years, just the passion. And, I've slowed down with a lot of that stuff, but I mean, I still, now with the podcast, that's kind of my outlet. I'm still looking for answers and talking to different people involved in the paranormal.
When did you decide that this is something? Because it's one thing to have like an interest or a hobby and you consume everything you can about a particular topic, and then you decide you have a point of view, right, on it. And that I imagine would lead to something like, creating the blog, which is what you did. And is that what happened, that you felt like you wanted to add like your take on this?
I seriously, it's weird. Like like we've been talking about, I obsessed about it and I really, really jumped in. And once I commit to something like that, I really do jump in. But I guess it was kind of a spiritual shift that I was having too at that time. And so it was just wanting to know a lot of answers. I've talked before, I grew up in not necessarily a very religious household, but, grew up in a Southern Baptist church. And, so you've got this kind of fairy tale picture of heaven and hell. And, all these stories. And, when I started getting into high school and I was very involved in the church, I was a musician all the way through college. And church has been, you're like, what? What? And you start using your own brain. And so, I mean, that kind of, I guess, started it a little bit. And so there's just kind of this awkward kind of, I'm not sure what I know and what I believe. And then all of a sudden 2008 and this time period, it's like, okay, all right, I can resonate with this, this is, this sounds good. And, I, especially with psychics and mediums, like I would read the book and I'd want to know what the afterlife was like. What was life like on the other side? And, it was kind of frustrating for a while, and I got burned out because you want to find that one answer. And when, you read 15 different books by 15 psychics and they each say a different thing, and then you're like, I want to know what happens, and you're each telling me something different. But, I think my current kind of theory is that it is what we all think it's going to be, or what we plan on it to be. I don't know. And I'm not an intellectual at all, but I don't know. That's what I would like to think. And I probably just went 4 miles past your answer, your question you asked me.
No, I mean, the questions are always a jumping off point. And obviously you can take them and you answer them in a way that I think resonates more with you, which is, I think, even more important. So then you had the blog for a while, and then I imagine, based on what you were consuming podcasts at the time, and what was the impetus to feel like you wanted to start your own show on the same topic?
Well, 2008 was also a year where I had just met my partner at the time, and he's a pretty techie dude, and he was listening to some podcasts, and I'm like, okay, what are those? What are podcasts? And I also remember he had an iPhone at the time, like the very first iPhone, and I was rocking my iPod Shuffle, I think, then, and he knew I was into the paranormal, and even though he would roll his eyes, but he knew I was into it. And he said, well, there's this paranormal podcast or something that's out there, or I don't know. He may not have known a specific one, but and I don't know exactly how it happened, but so for several years, the only podcast I ever knew about or listened to was the Paranormal podcast with Jim Harold. And so that, I've said several times, that was podcasting, to me. And so really in those early days, and it wasn't the beginning, he was, I think, in it in 2005, but, I caught up with that podcast too. But I would wait for a whole week, and that was my relaxation, and it would drive me nuts waiting for the next episode. And it wasn't until probably like 3 years ago that I started listening to other podcasts gradually. 2 years ago, for sure, is when I just started filling up the Overcast app and really listening. And it was Jim Harold, actually, one day on Facebook. He had at the time, a podcast course. And I saw it, and I remember, and I assuming that he's not even reading or not even checking it out or anything. And I made a comment like, hey, this is kind of cool. And he encouraged me, and I was like, well, I'm not sure I'd ever really thought about it seriously, but when he encouraged me, I was like, I guess that's all the encouragement I need. That's it. And so that summer, teacher summers, I crammed through the course, which was awesome, really, and took notes. I didn't take I did take a couple of months where I just kind of planned, and then all of a sudden I jumped in, and there for a while I was doing weekly episodes. And as you start, I getting to the point where I'm getting so produced for me that, I can't do weekly anymore. It's like a 2-week thing. But I enjoy it. That's where I sit down too much. I'm sitting here right in front of the computer all the time. Have no life, but I love it.
Well, it's funny. You say you have no life, but I'm sure you've started to experience this thing that happens when you start a podcast and you start to find the people that resonate with your show, and then they start to reach out to you, whether it's on social media or some feedback section that you have on your page, or even something as simple as an iTunes review, and you think, like, where are these people, or who are these people, and this is amazing, and then they like what I do, and it's this affirmation, and this feeling, there's this almost one of the first tipping points as a podcaster, I think, is when you realize you're not doing this in a vacuum. And I'm wondering if you had some of those moments that you're conscious of as the show is growing.
Yeah, I did, and I was fortunate enough to have that blog first.
Yeah.
So I did kind of retain, I have no clue what the audience would have been other than WordPress stats, but I did have quite a few supporters and friends from the blog follow me pretty quickly to the podcast. And, I think back to, you mentioned it earlier, and I've heard a lot of podcasters say that when you get your name, mentioned on another podcast, and it is like really like the president of the United States just said your name, and you're like, shut up, yes. And I'm doing the dishes or something and like screaming. And so I think part of me was like, that's really cool. And I've heard from people saying, thank you, this really meant a lot, or I've really needed kind of this outlet or, different things. And so even though I think like most podcasters, we don't get as much feedback and communication as we would like, it's enough to make me think, there are people that are depending on, not necessarily depending on it, but waiting for it and really kind of needing it for whatever reason, which is cool.
Yeah. You probably may have remembered, not obviously which episode, but the fact that I sort of doubled down on my commitment. I think it was earlier this year, because I just had this sort of aha moment where I said, if I don't take it seriously, how can I expect the listener to think that this is something that they should be investing their time in? And so it used to be like, oh, it would come out and it would come out sometime during the week, or maybe it'd skip a week. And then I realized there's this switch that happens when you hold yourself accountable and and in my case, publicly declare that, okay, by hook or by crook, I'm going to try to get these out every week. And sometimes it's Monday morning, sometimes it's Monday evening, occasionally super early Tuesday. But yeah, I mean, I have this set schedule in mind. I have a commitment, obviously to myself, but then to my my small and growing group of diehard fans. They like hearing the episodes. I get more and more feedback, and that sort of drives you, right? And it drives you and it pushes you on those days when you're like, oh, what am I doing this for? Who am I doing this for? It's not like I'm John Lee Dumas and making $250,000, a month on my podcast. But I think if we first do it for the passion and we do it with a commitment, then I think there's some part of the listener that resonates with that, and they said, oh, he's taking it seriously, and if he's showing up, then like I'm going to show up to consume it, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Did you find that was the? Did you find, or did you have a moment in your show where you had that same thought about committing to being more regular with the episodes?
For me, I was actually more regular, not necessarily in putting the show out on the same day each week or anything like that, but when I was having the show weekly at the beginning, and then I'm pretty busy with just, my one nerdy teaching job. And as a music teacher, there's those times of year where you're really stressed or you're really busy. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I'm going to, go crazy. And it really, it drove me nuts cutting back. And then there are those times where, like I said, there's either times of stress. I always want my podcast to be just kind of authentically what's going on in my paranormal world at the moment. And so there are some times when, I've been in my car or doing activities with school or concerts or whatever, and I come home and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got a podcast to come. I'm like, man, what's going on paranormal? I'm just kind of looking around, and I feel like I've got to find something. But yeah, it just kind of depends on what time of year it is. But I loved doing the podcast weekly. That was really fun. But like, we talked about earlier, as things get more and more produced, and that's how people are liking things. I enjoy doing that. I enjoy, editing out every breath. And, I do, I will listen to my episodes like 3 or 4 times by the time I'm done kind of deciding what it's going to be. And I put a lot of time into it, and, and it's like, man, I wish I could do this.
Yeah, well,
weekly or more regularly, consistently, I guess. Because I don't know what my next episode is going to be at this point. Lately, that's what it's been.
Well, you've had some good guests, and I'm wondering, obviously, and since mine is purely interview driven, I know what it takes to sort of plan ahead, and you have to send out like the 20 invites to get back the 10 responses and the 5 commitments and the 2 reschedules and like the 2 that stick. So it's like a funnel, like a sales funnel. But is that something that you try to mix in solo episodes with the guests, or is that something that's always in the works, like trying to find the next guest?
Right now, I've kind of slacked in that area. Like I need to sit down and I've gotten some suggestions by some listeners. And unfortunately, a lot of the suggestions people have are like bigger names that I'm most likely I'm not going to get, Jason and Grant from Ghost Hunters or, all of those people.
Never seen never.
But, yeah.
All you got,
at least anytime soon.
Well, all you got, it's funny, Patrick. All you have to do, and I'm huge on just kind of intention and law of attraction and putting it out to the universe. And sometimes you just got to put the tweet out and just say, hey, whenever you're ready, and just tag them on Twitter. I'm open for you on the show, and then just do that. Put a reminder, tweet that out once every 6 months, and you just someone. It's the weirdest thing, but someone who's a friend of someone who's a fan of the show, who's a cousin with someone who like slept in the guy's guest house or something, is going to be like, oh, and don't even try to predict like what the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon is. It'll work itself out. So I mean, just put them out there, and that's why I say it. Let me know here. Just I want it to hit the airwaves because I want to.
Well, now once this Podcast Junkies episode is out, we'll see. Maybe all of a sudden the word will be out.
Yes. And so what are your big fish? We all have our big fish, right? I'm going after Roman Mars, and just in case he's listening, and I wouldn't mind having Joe Rogan on and Tim Ferriss and a couple other heavy hitters. So at some point,
well, that's it for me. It would be there's this for paranormal people. And there are different camps, I guess. And there are the people that absolutely got started by paranormal TV and love paranormal TV, but won't admit it. For me, that would be it. There's this mystery surrounding all of these really popular and successful paranormal reality shows. Is part of it scripted? Yeah. Is it really real? Do they have people really going around and investigating for them, and then they just are in the shots? Are they really there for 3 days? Is it, it's so weird. It seems to be so secretive. And I mean, really, the paranormal is huge right now, but it's not, like the biggest, I don't even know what word I'm looking for, but it's not the biggest genre in the world. So it's not like they could talk, but they don't. I don't know if it's a contract thing or what it is.
That just adds more mystery to it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what are they hiding?
But I always, the paranormal, I call it the paranormal craze right now that we've been in for a little more than a decade.
The paranormal activity.
I'm like, this craze is going to kind of end or slow down one of these days. And when it does, one of them, I'm going to get one of them or, and get them talking. They might be in a, paranormal retirement home for reality stars in 20 years or something. It might be there, but that's probably one of my bigger fish right there. And there's many of them at this point. There's 3 or 4 bigger shows. It would be nice. And I think a lot of paranormal fans would so be there ready to hear their answers.
Well, I think there's so much opportunity to mix things up. I mean, like top of mind, I'm a child of the 80s. So I when I think paranormal, like the first, I think movie that I think of is Poltergeist. Uh-huh. And so, that movie that scared the shit out of me when I was, I was like this, the clown, obviously everyone hates clowns, but the clown under the bed and it was just crazy, like, at the time. And I think it holds up rather well. And I'll never forget that scene where she's running down the hallway and they do the camera panning dolly thing where it looks like that was like, I think that's the very first time I ever saw that effect in a movie where they're running down the hallway but it looks like they're being pulled back. It's really crazy. And so but you could like interview some of those actors, and the other one's the Blair Witch Project, which is kind of paranormal, right? I'm not sure, but
you know what, I love that movie and people make fun of me for that. It's one of my almost every fall I watch Blair Witch Project. I mean, it was like a trendsetter kind of with this. What's the style they call the found footage? Movies, and that got it started. And it was all like improv. I mean, shut up. That's cool.
It was. I mean, internet was still was picking up then, and I think now it would be debunked faster. But at the time, people didn't know what to make of it, and they were just like, "Is this real? Is this not real?" And the buzz was like, "It's real," and they found it, and they were like, "Holy shit, this is crazy."
Yeah, and I didn't see it before everybody found out, so I saw it after everybody knew, and still it fascinated me. And I remember at the time, gosh, there was this huge website at the time, and I remember also seeing some interviews with the main girl, I forget her name, in that movie, and just going through the process of how they filmed it. And they would give them like cards or something with like their inspiration and like their next step that they had to make, but they had to keep it secret from each other, you know, and so it was, part of it was planned, but a lot of it was just, here's your character. We're going to scare you later on tonight. Let's see. Get in the tent, go to sleep. We're going to come scare you. Camera's on, ready to go. That's kind of cool.
That's genius, because I hadn't even read about that, but it's great to think that someone was thinking like outside the box. Like, I got to come up with different ideas, because nowadays it's so hard to like scare people, and the Saw movies are ridiculously like gory. I don't even watch those because it's like over the top. Like how much more blood and gore do you need to show? So occasionally a movie comes along like The Cabin, which I don't know if you've seen that, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, it takes a lot to kind of shock us these days, because and sometimes the truth is much stranger than the fiction.
Right. I am all about the old school haunted movies, like a haunted house movie. The classic Ghost, and the more CGI is a part of the movie, like the less I follow it.
Yeah.
And I, there was a time growing up, maybe when I was into more of the gore. But now, God, I can't stand the blood and guts. I'm like, that's just, maybe it's just being old now, but
yeah,
I like the sound effects and the old school scare.
Yeah, it's almost an easy way out. The blood and the gore is like the shock values is really easy that way. I'm wondering the other angle you could take on the guest is to go after like Melissa McCarthy, because she's going to be in Ghostbusters, and obviously Ghostbusters is a paranormal movie.
Oh, there you go. I need to be taking notes now. I love her. I love her so much.
Yeah, she's hilarious. So
she is hilarious.
You could think about the movies and even like the parodies of the movies. I think to the extent that people don't take themselves too seriously, and they could come on and just shoot the shit about that.
Yeah, I guess I kind of thought about it. A lot of paranormal folks or Halloween nerds, because I'm one of those too. There's this new kind of thing with Hocus Pocus. The Hocus Pocus is now this new classic, movie that even like I can mention Hocus Pocus to my kids now, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we love that movie." And I was in middle school when that movie came out, and so I considered this year seeing, oh my gosh, can I get some of these folks from this old Hocus Pocus movie? I thought that would have been cool, but I didn't do that either. But that something like that would have been cool. Maybe one of these days. If they're listening, if you're an old Hocus Pocus actor/actress, contact me.
I don't remember that movie. What was that about?
That was the one with Bette Midler, and it was the three witches, the Sanderson sisters, in Salem.
Okay.
But they came back into modern day. There was the cat. It's just perfect Halloween cheese. It's Disney. Pretty sure it's Disney. And Sarah Jessica Parker was one of the witches, and Kathy Najimy. Oh yeah. And oh my gosh, it is such a good Homework.
Yeah.
Come on, Harry.
That sounds like The Craft.
It's kind of the same kind of, feel, but it's on cable like 1,100 times a week in the fall. So you need to check it out next fall. It'll be on.
Yeah, I think
promise.
that's one of those. That's one of those ones you put in the queue, and with the holiday season coming up and the breaks and everything like that, you just get caught up on all those sorts of movies.
Mm-hmm. Yep, right along with like The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, all those. That's Hocus Pocus.
I'm wondering if there's an aspect to your childhood that was had something to do with performance, because a lot of the folks that I speak to, there's something about them that there's this creative itch that they want to scratch. And myself, it was DJing that as I've talked about a lot of times on the show, and I'm wondering if there was something similar for you that you can recall.
Are you psychic? Are you sure? You might be.
It is. It is. We are covering the paranormal, so.
We are. Actually, yeah. I mean, I've been many kinds of nerds growing up, but I was very into dance growing up. I was in a fairly small high school, and so I was able to do it all. A lot of people can't do that. I was in band, choir, drama. I did speech tournaments and plays and musicals. And I can't believe I'm going to admit this now, but I was so hardcore with like certain things. My dad and my parents are like the greatest parents in the world, that they went with anything that I went with. My father, and I don't know how many fathers would do this, but we lived in the country, had a big backyard. My father painted a freaking football field in my backyard.
Wow.
So that I could march around on my football field, because I was obsessed with the marching band for many years. And not because, his son wanted to play football, but because he wanted to march on the football field pretending he was in a marching band. So that they rolled with anything like that. I was in dance for several years and, always been a music nerd. I did a few regional theater things, when I was cute before, middle school happened. And so you're right.
So that's an amazing story. That your dad is awesome. That the fact that he did that for you. I think a lot of times parents, for better or for worse, I think maybe they try to steer their kids in a direction where they feel like they'll fit in, and they don't let them branch out and discover things on their own, because when we're young, we don't know what the hell we want to do, and we just want to try everything. And I see it with my nieces a lot. So kudos to your dad to like fanning those flames of like creativity, and that's an amazing like tip for any up and coming parents, and just like let your kids to the as much as and as long as possible do whatever floats their boat.
Absolutely. I mean, another story I remember is, I remember we went one weekend, we went to some water slides, some place that had water slides. And so of course that weekend I decided, Dad, I am building a water slide. We are going to have a water park. I promise you, I'm going to build this water park. We are going to be famous. Awesome. He's like, okay, cool. Shovel's over there in the corner. And, so I, on the side of his house, am digging this trench. I didn't get very far, but I'm starting to dig this trench. And, they're just like, okay, well, good luck. Just let me figure out that, this is really kind of silly. But it was cool while the idea lasted, things like that.
Yeah, for like the first 2 hours that you were digging, and then you're like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. But I will tell you that I had the exact same idea when I was younger.
Shut up, really?
So we had these woods in the back of our house. It wasn't like big. It was just like the distance of like a lot where eventually like a home went up later, and my father regrets not buying it because now the home is ugly and it sits behind his house. But at the time it was like it was sloped up and it would head on up to the next street. And I wish we did the typical in the woods things, build a tree house and play around there. But but we had a pool in our backyard, so naturally I already had like the landing pad for the water slide. It was going to be the pool. So I was like, yes, we could build a water slide and charge admission, and then people would just enter at the top and they would land in our pool, and like we charge them like 50 cents a slide or something. Obviously I was trying to like make money. I don't know why the hell I was trying to make money out of it, but it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I remember thinking about like if I I don't know, had a couple of other partners in crime for that, I think we might have actually given it a go.
Yeah, I was going to build a bridge too. We had a lake behind our house. It wasn't our lake, but there was a lake, and I was going to build this massive, like 4-lane highway across the. I mean, I wasn't even like a typical boy. I mean, I would not have known how to even do anything like that. I don't know what I thought, but we also had like, I was fortunate enough to have, I was basically given the attic to our house, and it was my bedroom for a while, but before that it was just the playroom. We had haunted houses up there. We would force, our parents to go up there, and they'd, roll their eyes, do it, and be like, yay, okay. And then it was done. We'd spend all summer, getting ready for it. I had a school up there. My poor little sister would always have to, they'd send her up there every day in the summer to go do school. I'd blow all my allowance and Christmas money and go buy office supplies and nerdy teacher things and do school. And I don't know. I was, I guess, just always very creative that way. And I guess creative mixed with obsessive. I guess that's just what you do.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because and then you later became a teacher, which I think is funny.
Yeah. And I there was a time when I actually my freshman year of undergrad, I actually was a music composition major. So there was this time where I think I always knew I would probably be a teacher, but when I got to, I was in my composition classes, and here I am going, well, everybody else in the class is like, okay, cool. I made this really awesome piece, and it's for like, chainsaw and flute. And there's this other guy going, yeah, man. And I made this, atonal thing. Da, da, da. And I'm like, yeah, I've got this, piano song. It's got like, harmony, sounds like John Williams, it's pretty. And they're like, oh, okay, nice. And I was like, I don't fit in here. And so I decided to go ahead and do, I think, what I knew I would be a teacher. I didn't know what it would be. I was into band and choir and drama. I knew it was going to be something in the arts, and eventually, landed in vocal music.
Where was home growing up?
Home was outside of Kansas City in a small Civil War battle town. A town of 5,000, Lexington, Missouri, not Lexington, Kentucky, which is a lot of people think, but Lexington, Missouri. Cute little town. Of course, I didn't think about it now. Now I appreciate it a lot more, but small town, lots of history, cool buildings, lots of haunted places, I'm sure. It's about 3 hours from here. I get there often, not often enough is what I was trying to say.
You said Civil War, like Civil War reenactments?
Yeah, like there was a 2-day battle, I think, the Battle of Lexington. And we have, there's one of the oldest courthouses still in use in the state, I think, and or maybe the country, I don't know. But this is really funny. Our big claim to fame is that there's a cannonball stuck in one of the pillars of the courthouse. And there's this, even in a small town, there's like this mystery where some people are like, no, it's not like right. I always thought that it was a croquet ball. It's like this croquet ball because they took the cannonball down, because you don't want that to fall down on somebody. Yeah. And so part of the town is like, no, it's a croquet ball. And the other part of the town's like, no, it's still the cannonball. The cannonball's up there. And so it's like anybody cares, really. But I mean, it's, have you ever seen Waiting for Guffman? That Christopher Guest movie?
No, I haven't. I heard.
Oh my gosh, that's what Lexington reminds me of. somebody out there is going to get that and laugh really hard.
What's interesting is, it's small town America. There's not much else going on, right? So like little things like that, like they make the whole town like you can build a parade around like the cannonball in the wall parade, and like the whole town would show up, and it's just that aspect of that's like the highlight of their year.
Absolutely. And before cell phones, we had our cars and we cruised town, and had football fields painted in our yards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the driving around thing reminds me of American Graffiti. I'm wondering if it was something like that.
Yeah, it was very much kind of a newer form of that. Yeah, I had a station wagon. Man, I would cruise. I worked at Pizza Hut, and I would blow my whole paycheck on fuel for my station wagon and just drive around the route. Honk at your friends.
How many people were cruising in station wagons?
Oh, I'm pretty sure I was the only station wagon, and people still remember it to this day. Actually, it had, there was, when I worked at Pizza Hut, there were sticker machines at the time at Pizza Hut. And I don't know how it got started. I guess I had some bumper stickers, but I started putting some of those stickers on the back. And all these little kids at Pizza Hut would come and be like, here's a sticker for your car. So I'd put so the back of it kind of looked like this hippie mobile for a while. So it was kind of recognizable. It was puke green. So you couldn't miss it. But that was the thing back then. Everybody would cruise, and there were kind of the rules about the cruising and honking and going to Sonic. That was like the cool thing. And there was the cool side of Sonic and like the not cool side of Sonic. And now you go back in town and it's like quiet and there's like no cars. I think, number one, I don't think kids just automatically get cars like they used to. Things are more expensive and gas but they're probably home on their phones.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had that same feeling when I go back to visit my parents. We grew up literally playing stickball on the streets. Like, it's crazy. Like, and all the kids in the neighborhood would get together, and it was probably 15. I mean, we'd have enough to do like 2 teams of like running bases, and I don't know even know if these games still exist, but like tag, or we used to call it ring-a-levio, which is like a fancy tag, or hide and go seek, fancy hide and go seek. It's called ring. I never understood why it's called ring-a-levio, but just football, street hockey, and it was just every kid in the neighborhood would come out. And then I go back, and the streets are dead now, and it's just like, and it's almost like I think there's an aspect of parents don't trust having their kids out on the street anymore, or there's just less kids in the neighborhood, or there's some combination of all that. And I feel like it was, I don't know, not to sound Norman Rockwell-ish, but it's just a much simpler time.
Yeah, and what's really scary is that we were, probably seen as spoiled and, not doing everything outside like we could have back then. I remember my dad always talking about how, we need to get out more, and, you're so spoiled here in this air conditioning because we never had air conditioning, that kind of thing. And, it's scary. I did in my concert the other night with my choir kids, we did the Telephone Hour, which is that telephone song from Bye Bye Birdie, from the 50s. And so I got a whole bunch of old telephone receivers for that performance, and I had to teach them how to hold the phone up against their ear, and they're like, "Shut up! What? This is like what?"
That's funny. Yeah, we take all that stuff for granted. I mean, like you can give like a 5-year-old an iPad now, and within like minutes they'll just be swiping and using it. And there's something that we're I don't know, some sort of hardwiring in us that, we just naturally, if it's intuitive enough, we'll figure it out. So I mean, and I imagine that the user interfaces will just get more and more intuitive as, now they've got the virtual reality thing coming out. And there'll be holograms and stuff that like, we can't even imagine right now. I was wondering.
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation with somebody about this. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think there's actually like a couple of seconds delay on the which is why I was like, I stop and then you're like, and then you're answering and then you stop and then I'm like, oh, that's funny. That reminds me of like a Saturday Night Live skit, and it was three people, and there was one woman in the middle, and then on the left was someone who could travel to the future, and it was 30 seconds ahead of the rest of the world, and then and the other person was 30 seconds behind the rest of the world. I got to find it to see if it's online or something, but it was just like very juvenile and very hilarious, just because the one guy would be like, he'd sneeze and like the snot would come out of his nose, but it hadn't happened yet. So the guy all the way on the right would be like freaking out, like, "Oh my god, that's so disgusting!" And the one in the middle would be like, "What?" And then you'd wait a couple of seconds later, and then you'd see the guy sneeze. So like he was reacting to something that was happening in the future, and the person in the middle was like freaking out, like, "What?" So that's kind of what's happening now. It's funny.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward. It's like being a correspondent from CNN or something.
Yeah. You the guy from the anchor desk, he's like, so Patrick, tell me like what the tornado is going like, and then you sit there in the camera for like at least, well, it seems like an eternity if you're watching it, and then he's just like, and then you're like, answer the freaking question, and then you're like, yes it is, it's crazy, the winds are crazy here, and yeah, I think we're getting out of. That's it feels like talking about old timey news.
Yeah. The kids are like, what?
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about you mentioned your father as an example, and I'm wondering if there's anyone else that comes to mind, like a relationship you've had with a pastor, or maybe even a current teacher or mentor who's had also had an impact on your life.
Gosh, I have, my family, really. My paranormal team that I had in 2010 was my family. We've always been a really close bunch. And actually, you asked earlier about my connection with cemeteries, too. And even though I wasn't really the paranormal nerd then, like I am now, but one of my grandmas used to watch me a lot when my parents were working. And I got really close with my grandma, and she had a cemetery not far from her house, actually, in the middle of nowhere. And that's where kind of my earliest experience with cemeteries. She would pack me a lunch sometimes. And I just, go hang out in the cemetery, just go chill. I even remember we'd play like school or something, out there in the cemetery even. But no, that's kind of random. Sorry. Family is really close, and they've kind of taken this interest in the paranormal kind of with me. And I think I bugged them for a while because I'm, my mom always says, "You're just such a teacher," because I'm training them and I'm, giving them agendas, and I'm giving them, manuals on things. And they're like, "We just want to have fun. You realize that, right?" I'm like, "Okay, that's fine, but we've got to be serious. Yeah. We've got to do it right." Yeah, I'm definitely close with family, and I've had my, different teachers growing up. It makes me so sad when I'll ask people, who was your so-and-so teacher? And they're like, "Well, his name was, oh gosh, what was it?" And I'm like, "What? I know every single one of my teachers' names."
Yeah.
But yeah, I had several teachers that influenced me or supported me in, whatever way. Probably none of them imagined I would be such a para nerd now, because this is kind of a later in life random thing, I suppose.
Well, I wonder, one of the reasons I asked that is obviously because you're a teacher now, and I'm wondering, as you obviously have the show, and you teach as well. Do you think about the fact, and have you seen people that maybe remind you of what you were like, and do you think about, are you conscious of the fact that you can now have that opportunity to be a mentor to someone else?
Absolutely. I mean, I have a ton of kids, and sometimes it's always bugged me actually in the back of my mind that I can't really get to know each one of them like I would like to. It's a really large school, and in a 3-year rotation, I see almost every kid in the building. It could be 700 kids, and but I do know that I relate to many of them in different ways. And middle school is so weird, and every now and then you just have to sit down with them and be like, guys, like, I get it. Middle school is gross sometimes, and it's so weird. And you guys are little aliens sometimes. I love you, but you are. And you just need to know that it's cool. Don't follow everything. And even if I don't tell them, I think I'm always using the word nerd. I'm trying to turn the word nerd around, and I kind of had in my own little world, and we talk about being a nerd all the time. I'm sure some of them get tired of it, but I always encourage them to be at least three or four different kinds of nerd and rock it, and own it. And so I got to the point where I talk about it a lot, just different random things that I'm nerdy with, or a podcast nerd, or a paranormal nerd, or a techie nerd, and I get them talking about it now. And even if they don't, I want them to go throughout their day. And if whatever it is, they're like, well, if Mr. Keller can be a giant nerd. I mean, I don't know if they think that or not. They're probably like, oh God, old Mr. Keller. But, cause I used to be way hipper than I am now. But, maybe in the back of their mind, they're like, you know what? It's okay. But you never know what the middle schoolers are thinking.
That's great, because I think nerds. First of all, nerds are cool now, and so I think it's not such a scarlet letter, because nerds are basically ruling the universe at this point. I mean,
they are.
Yes, Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and all these other people like starting these tech companies that are instant billionaires. So I think it gives them something to strive for, and I think the fact that you're able to support them and show them that this period that they're going through, because if you anyone that's listening that remembers, late 7th and 8th grade and early high school, man, it's just awkward times.
Ugh, gross. I mean, really. I mean, I remember all my teachers for sure, but I don't have a ton of memories from middle school, specific memories. I mean, I guess I don't have a really good memory anyway, but I have way more memories from like elementary school and high school. It's that middle school that I guess maybe our brain, to protect us, maybe sometimes blocks those things out.
Yeah, I think so, to avoid mental trauma. So as you think about the future of the show, what do you think are going to be some of the biggest challenges as you look to grow it?
Well, right now I've kind of had in general just kind of a real steady growth. There's never been a moment where it's just all of a sudden been a jump. I guess that's not true. I've had one random episode about some haunted history locally around here, and it was connected to a Ghost Hunters episode that was coming out, and just the right few people kind of publicized that and shared that, and that was this huge. I was like, really? That randomly, that one? Why that one? But the last episode, as of this, recording that I did, it was like only my second on location type thing. And I really kind of loved it. And so I kind of feel like, and like I said, lately I've been so busy that I'm kind of going episode by episode. So I don't have a lot of plans for the future. or guests. I just kind of, as it happens, it happens. But I'm kind of wondering if there's any way to. I went to this haunted schoolhouse in Alton, Illinois, that has this legend, and it's just this fascinating place, and it's like an hour away from me. But it's like this cool art center now, and a business incubator, and I went and interviewed them, and just piecing together, like we said, again, everything is so produced now, this storytelling kind of thing, and that's kind of different. But I'm just kind of wondering if I can do more of that. That just seemed very cool, and so I don't know that that's necessarily. I've always had a lot of solo episodes that aren't necessarily interview that I kind of intersperse into my episodes. So maybe I'm kind of in this transition period. Maybe I'm not quite to 2 years yet. And so I don't know what 2 years had to do with it. But
yeah, I mean, I think, it's our show, so we can kind of figure out what, we can always try new things, right? We can always see what works, what doesn't. And I think your topic seems like it would lend itself well to, telling stories about locations. We were talking in the pre-show or maybe during this show about the interview I had with Bill Barrell of Home Stories from LA. So it's kind of that same topic where you could be like, the paranormal story of X town, Y town, and maybe as the show grows, you can do a Kickstarter and tell them you want to take the show on the road.
Yeah. And I think it also might be an influence of some buddies of mine. A lot of our listeners are the same. It's the History Goes Bump podcast, and their tagline is ghost tours for the theater of the mind. And so, from their studio, they take you to a different place each time and give you the history and the legend and maybe some of the facts. And so you really kind of feel like you're there, taking a tour. And I don't know, maybe it's kind of that influence too. But when there's plenty of, supposed haunted locations around, and I don't know, I guess maybe it could be something like that. I might have to try. You never know.
Yeah. Very cool. What's the one most misunderstood thing about you?
The one most misunderstood thing about me. Oh my God. I prepared for when's the last time you changed your mind? I want you to know that. Gosh.
I figured you might, so I got to throw you for a loop.
Gosh, I don't know. I know that a lot of people, I don't know if this is the most, but a lot of people probably see me as this, I'm goofy and I laugh a lot. And I act like a giant middle schooler sometimes, but I'm not real social, maybe. Sometimes I say I want to be a recluse when I grow up. I think I could really rock the recluse life. I would dig that. Maybe that's one thing. I don't know.
That's good.
Growing up, I loved, kids would come over and be like, "Hey, do you want to come out and play?" I'm like, "No, I'm good. Thanks." And I think as I get older, maybe that gets a little bit worse. And, now with the podcast, I've always got something to do and focus on. And it's a very individual kind of personal thing.
So not to let your homework go to waste, what have you changed your mind about recently?
Okay. Well, first of all, as a middle school teacher, we change our mind like 100 times a day, probably. And actually, I shouldn't have even told you that I worked it up because my answer is really stupid now. But really, authentically, like my answer is I decided to have coffee with my dinner.
Okay.
Instead of soda. I hope you're impressed. That is my answer.
That's wonderful about that question. You just never know what the hell you're going to get. And so That's interesting.
Actually, I had a backup. What was my backup?
Either way, you're going to be. Apparently, the caffeine doesn't keep you up at night.
No, I mean, I definitely consume a lot of caffeine, and I'm not the healthiest person in the world. So, I drink a lot of diet soda and everything too. But I know people are listening, but here's I call this my flower pot sized coffee cup, and this is typical for me twice a day.
Wow.
I can throw one of these back, and when I'm ready, go right to bed.
Cool.
Typically.
Yeah, weird. I think for the listener, that was probably the equivalent of a venti. No, tall venti.
Big gulp, maybe.
On that note, thanks for taking the time to come on.
You're welcome. I was really excited and pumped, and I was very honored to be asked.
Yes.
So I appreciate. I'll keep tweeting.
Yes,
for sure.
Thank you. And I imagine you'll be the first one to tweet about your own episode. So
I better. I'll be like setting an alarm for like 3:00 that night, just in case I sleep through it.
That would be ironic if you missed that one. So, Patrick, what's the best way for folks to track you down online?
My website is bigseance.com, and all my links are there. And I'm also on Twitter at Big Séance, and I think that's it. BigSeance.com is where it's at, paranerds.
And your local Ouija board, I imagine.
Yeah, although my followers know that I love the Ouija board, but I get nothing out of it. I want something to happen so badly, and I've done a lot of experiments and stuff in spirit communication, and I've gotten spirit communication, or what I feel is spirit communication, but it doesn't come from the Ouija board. So when people are like, "Oh my gosh, you shouldn't do that. It's so dangerous," and it's so da-da-da, I'm like, really? Because I'm using it as a coaster right now. So not bothering me.
Yeah. Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, I suppose you're right.
All right. Thanks so much, Patrick, and have a fantastic evening and a great holiday as well.
You too. I appreciate it. You rock.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
You as well. So hopefully we didn't spook you out too much with talks of the paranormal and Ouija boards. Had a fun chat with him, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to bring him on the show because he's such an important supporter of the show, and I really want to do what I can to support him in the podcast. And again, it's just one of those things that 4 months ago, we didn't even know each other, and we just began to engage on social media because he was devouring all the episodes, and I was just surprised. It's a shock sometimes, still when I see people dive in like that with both feet. And he's definitely a regular listener. So he got it's the podcast about podcasters, and then we have the fan of the podcast about podcasters, who's a podcaster, come on, and it gets into a super meta rabbit hole at that point. But I hope you enjoyed that. So make sure you show Patrick some love on social media. He's at Big Séance. Podcast Junkies is a proud member of Podcastica, so make sure you check out podcastica.com to hear the shows, the episodes from all the hosts that are doing really, really great work. We're working on the website as we speak, and if not by now, then within the next week or two, we should have a brand new site up with all the feeds from everyone's show. So right now it's a static site, but there are things in the works there. Intro and outro music provided by Cedar and Soil. And don't forget to support the show. I had a little brain fart right there. Support, subscribe, and then tell a friend, and then rate and review. And if you have questions about how to do that, then just the easiest thing to do is just head on over to podcastjunkies.com/iTunes, and then all the good stuff happens there. If you can, support the show. I know there's a Patreon page I've talked about in the past, but I think the easiest way to do it, if you're going to do some shopping at Amazon, check out the Amazon button we have on the main site, and it has a link to all podcasting related equipment. And then we have the new podcastjunkies.com/affiliates page, which you can check out as a way to show your support. I'm continuing to add services that I use on a regular basis. So it's the same thing as me saying an ad before the show or after the show. But this is just all those services in one place and with an affiliate link that helps provide some support for the show so I can pay for all the things that need to be paid for to bring this to you week in and week out. So I appreciate your help at all times, in all places, on all planets, in all dimensions, whatever that means. The retention hashtag. It's been a long night. The retention hashtag is Paranormal Patrick. That's a long one, so you might have to shorten your tweet. But Paranormal Patrick, I think, would apply here. So check it out and tweet me at podcast_junkies and Patrick at Big Séance. Take care, guys, and hope we didn't give you any cause for nightmares this evening. I doubt it. It was pretty harmless. See ya.